Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Have a fun video for you guys today. We are going to be talking about drugstore makeup products that I think are just as good as high-end. Now honestly, I could probably have a much longer list than we're going to be going through today. I think so often the drugstore does a really good job with makeup products. I could honestly go through a much longer list of products than what we're going to go through today because I think there are a ton of products at the drugstore that are just as good as high-end or compete with high-end products, but today we're going to go through what I consider some of the best of the best. Some of these are new products. I've got a couple of old favorites that you will have maybe seen before, and then a handful of things that have been a bit overlooked, but I thought deserved a mention for this video. So we're going to go through everything today, talk about some really awesome drugstore makeup. But before we get into that, I want to wish my new visitors a special welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Hope you enjoy this video, and I hope you'll consider subscribing before you leave. Also, make sure notifications are turned on. With that said, let's get to it. Okay, before we jump into all the makeup, just a quick note, I am wearing pretty much all of these products on my face today, which I will link everything down below for you guys. Let's go through some face products first, starting with this one right here. This is the e.l.f. Halo Glow Liquid Filter. This is a very impressive dupe for the Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Flawless Filter. I do own that one as well, and these are very, very similar. The only subtle difference I think I have found is I think the Charlotte Tilbury one for my skin, if I'm using it as like a primer, that one can be just a tiny bit more hydrating for my skin, but just barely. I have the shade number 2. I also have shade number 2 in the Charlotte Tilbury version. This one is a little bit darker than the Charlotte Tilbury one, but it does still work really well for me. I love using this as a primer, and that was always my holdup with the Charlotte Tilbury one because it's so expensive. I kind of felt like it was too expensive for me to put underneath the foundation or to cover it up with something. It just felt like kind of a waste of a beautiful product, so I would mostly use that one as a highlighter, as a liquid highlighter. But with this one being so much more affordable, I don't feel that same reluctance to waste it underneath the foundation. I know that's kind of a stupid way to think of things, but it's just kind of how I am with my high-end makeup sometimes. Beautiful, beautiful finish though. It has the exact same pearly finish that the Charlotte Tilbury one has. It's nice and creamy. It doesn't separate like some products can kind of separate into this like almost chunky texture. I kind of feel that way with the Maybelline one, which I love. I love the Maybelline 4-in-1. Also, do you guys remember the Milani Soft Focus Glow? That one had kind of issues with it kind of separating. This one doesn't at all. It's nice and creamy. I've had mine for 3 or 4 months now and had no issues with it whatsoever. I kind of wish I would have got the shade number 1 so that I could use this also as a highlighter. This one actually does like match my skin tone really well, but if I want to highlight with it, I would like something a little bit lighter. It's a pretty multi-purpose product, just like the Charlotte Tilbury one is. You can use it as a primer, you can use it on top of your foundation, you can use it as like a standalone product because it does have a very light layer of coverage to it. So if you have really naturally beautiful skin, you just want something that's going to give you some glow, this would be great for that. Very impressed with this one. I think this is the closest dupe I have found yet for the Hollywood Flawless Filter, and I've tried a lot of this supposed dupes over the years. Let's go through a couple foundations. Starting with this one of my all-time favorite foundations that I think is every bit as good as anything high-end I've ever tried, the L'Oreal Infallible Fresh Wear Foundation. You guys know this is a favorite of mine. This is my 3rd bottle, and I'm about ready to buy a 4th, which that's really saying something. I don't repurchase foundations that often. I go through this stuff like crazy. Again, I'm wearing this on top of the Hollywood Flawless Filter. By the way, this works so well as a primer on top of medium coverage foundations because a little bit of that glow will come through. If you use anything too heavy of a coverage, you're not going to really notice the glow, but if you use a lighter medium coverage, oh, just gives you such a beautiful finish. And this is a beautiful, beautiful foundation. It's nice and lightweight, yet it still has really good solid medium coverage. You can build it up to medium to full coverage. This shade match, which is 425 Linen, is a perfect match for me. And that is sometimes hard to find at the drugstore. I often have issues with like undertones of foundations, or sometimes it's just hard to tell. That is one thing I do like about L'Oreal is they tend to have a larger shade range than some other drugstore brands. And often the way they organize their undertones makes it a little bit easier to find your shade. I actually don't know if they do that with this particular foundation, but generally speaking, I like the way L'Oreal does their shade ranges. Really great foundation. It works well on my dry skin as long as I moisturize underneath. I would imagine if you have more normal to even oily skin, because this is pretty budge proof and pretty transfer proof, I would imagine this would work for a lot of different people. That's really what I love most about this foundation is how transfer resistant it really is. If I'm ever wearing a hoodie that I'm gonna have to pull on and off, or a beanie or a ball cap, this is the foundation I will always reach for because it doesn't have the issues of just just melting off on my clothing the way that other things do. I wouldn't say it's 100% transfer proof, but it does a much better job than my other foundations do at rubbing off on my clothing. It also wears really well in the summer, by the way. Another drugstore favorite of mine that I think is so impressively good is the Flower Beauty Light Illusion Foundation. This has been a long time favorite of mine. I'm sure you've heard me talk about it before. Beautiful foundation finish if you like something more on the dewy hydrating side. This has a lovely glow to it. It wears pretty well on me. I wouldn't say it's long wearing necessarily, but it doesn't wear off on me as quick as the Wet n Wild one does, the Wet n Wild Dewy. That one's beautiful, but it doesn't last on me very long. This one lasts a little bit better, and another thing that this one has going for it, it is a little bit more expensive than the Wet n Wild, but the packaging on this is amazing, particularly the pump. I often have issues with pumps. I know I've ranted about this before, but some of my favorite high-end foundations that come in a pump, I have issues with, including my NARS Light Reflecting Foundation, my ABH Luminous Foundation, two of my favorite high-end foundations, and all of them have issues with the pumps. They tend to leak, they don't pump out very smoothly, particularly the NARS one. That one you can't really control how much you pump out. It's like one pump or nothing. So if you want to do a pump and a half, you're kind of out of luck. This one, however, does not give me any issues with any product leaking out of it. The pump never gets stuck. It's nice and smooth. So you can kind of, if you want to do just like a tiny bit of product, you can do that because it allows you to control how much comes out. The mechanics of this pump are better than most of my high-end pumps, and the product itself, the foundation, every bit as good as any high-end foundation that I own. I couldn't do this video without mentioning my current favorite drugstore concealer, the Physicians Formula Butterglow Concealer. I know you guys are probably so tired of me raving about this concealer, but this is just like my perfect concealer. I love this concealer so very much. It performs so well on me. It's that perfect in between of being really good coverage without it being too thick or too heavy, hydrating without it being too slippery or moving around on my face. It wears super well on me. It doesn't get like patchy throughout the day or start to look dry or settle into fine lines, but it also doesn't wear off. It's just a beautiful concealer. The only downside with this, which I've mentioned before, but just in case you're new, is the shade range is pretty small. I think they only have a total of 6 or 7 shades from light to dark. And while they do have a very light shade and then a pretty deep shade, it's probably going to be difficult for most people to find their perfect shade match within those 6 or 7 shades. But maybe if you can combine 2 shades together, I think it's totally worth it because the concealer itself is just so incredible. I wanted to share this. This is a very neglected product by me, but I felt like it deserved a mention, and it is the Profusion Highlight and Contour Palette. Now, I specifically want to mention Profusion's face products in general. I've had several face palettes from them over the years, and I've always been so impressed with their performance. If you can get past the very non-high-end filling packaging, the powders themselves are just really nice. I am wearing this one on my face today, both the bronzer and the highlighters, and they are just so good. They're pigmented. The colors are kind of just right. These ones in particular, they're kind of like that in between a bronzer and a contour. They're not too cool toned, but they're also not so warm that they're going to turn orange on you if that's kind of an issue for you. They blend really quickly and easily. The highlighters just look really beautiful on the skin, and they are so incredibly affordable. I think this thing is like $5 or $6. I will link it down below if I can find it online. And as I mentioned, I've had a few palettes from them over the years, and I felt the same way about all of them. They always impress me. I think they make great bronzers, even their blushes, if you can find one that has a blush in it. I did own one of those at one point, but I think Charlie got into it and destroyed the packaging, so I had to throw it away. But if we're talking just about performance, every bit as good as anything high-end that I own. I have a blush I wanted to mention that reminds me of some of my favorite high-end blushes, and it is the ColourPop Super Shock blush in the shade Between the Sheets. So this kind of reminds me of the Glow Play blushes from MAC. They're not exactly the same. This is a little bit more creamy and less kind of bouncy, but they perform very similarly on the cheeks. They're kind of that hybrid matte cream finish that I just love. I think it's beautiful. It looks so natural. It wears really well. And I'm pretty sure these were some of the first around in this type of formula. This particular shade is so lovely. It's just like the perfect shade. It's not too warm or too cool. It's just like a soft nude pink. You can build it up and get some really like poppy brightness out of it, or you can keep it nice and subtle. You can apply this with your finger with a sponge. I typically apply it with a brush. That's my favorite way to apply these type of products, but very impressive. I wonder if MAC maybe got their idea from ColourPop. I know these have been around for a while, the Super Shocks, and I know they kind of get overlooked and forgotten, but I still think these are every bit as good as anything high-end that I own. Okay, let's talk about a couple mascaras. I have just two I wanted to share with you guys today. First off, the one I'm wearing today is the Essence Lash Princess. Every time I pull this mascara out, I'm just so impressed with how well this performs. This mascara, I would say, is more for like volume and length. It makes your lashes look really, really full, but it also wears really well. It doesn't tend to flake or smudge on me. My only issue with this one is if my eyes tend to get watery, it will start to run a little bit. It's not water resistant. But that said, if it's just a normal day and I don't plan on being outside watching a tennis match or a baseball game or something, it works just fine for me. And you cannot beat the price on this mascara. $5 for a mascara that does this for your lashes is so impressive. But I also had to mention my Sky High mascara from Maybelline, one of my favorite mascaras at the drugstore. I love how lengthening this is. It's very defining and separating, never gets clumpy. And more than anything, I love how water resistant this is. This is not the waterproof version, this is just the normal version. And it holds up so well to my watery eyes. It doesn't start to clump off my lashes, it stays put, doesn't flake away, but it's not so waterproof that I can't just remove it pretty easily at night. As long as I have my water nice and warm and I use some soap, I don't need to reach for a makeup remover to get this off. It will come off my lashes with just a little bit of time. That's one of the things I love most about it. I have a couple higher end mascaras like my Tower 28 mascara. I feel the same way as this one about, but this one is a fraction of the price. And if you're someone that has watery sensitive eyes, this is probably my #1 recommendation from the drugstore. Okay, eyeshadow palettes. This one was tough because I feel like there's a lot of really affordable eyeshadow palettes at the drugstore these days that are so good. But when I'm really thinking about the best performing, I had to go to one brand, and that was BH Cosmetics. I think BH Cosmetics probably has the best formula that is every bit as good as some of my favorite high-end eyeshadow formulas, but is so incredibly affordable. Their shimmers in particular are just something special. So I pulled out the three that I currently own. The Avocado Toast, this is the one that I'm wearing on my eyes today, and I love this look that I came up with, you guys. I probably dipped into like 6 different shades. I don't know if I could recite to you which exact ones I used. I just kind of went in and just started building, and this is what we came up with. But I love this look. These perform so well. The mattes are gorgeous. I do have to point out in this particular palette, the Avocado Toast, this shade right here, Pit, which looks like kind of like a red purpley brown. Once in a while, there's an outer corner shade that I put on that it like makes me swoon. That's exactly how I felt putting this shadow on my outer corner today. Do you guys see that just smoky, rich depth, but it's kind of like berry toned. Oh, it's so pretty. But even more than that, the shimmers in these palettes are spectacular. They are so beautiful. They have so much sparkle and dimension in them, but the sparkle particles are really refined. So if you're not into glitter, it's not a noticeable glitter. It's just this beautiful, sparkly glow. Initially, I actually wanted to use my Blueberry Muffin palette today. Sadly, this palette has been discontinued. I could not find it anywhere online. That is so unfortunate because I think this might be one of my favorites from them. And I don't even like blue eyeshadow that much, but there are some shades in here, particularly the shimmers in here. If I was forced to pick the shimmers out of one palette in my collection and only use those for the rest of my life, this might be in the running because I just think these shimmers are gorgeous. They are so, so beautiful on the eyes. I mean, they're like celestial. So if you happen to own this one, pull it back out and give it some love. I didn't use it today because you can't purchase that one anymore. I wanted to show you guys something that you can still get your hands on. Another one I really love is the Hanging in Hawaii palette. I know this palette comes in different packaging now, but I love this color story. Beautiful, muted, neutral, soft browns that lean a little bit warm. They definitely lean warm, but they're not like obnoxiously warm. Again, love the shimmers in here. They are glorious on the eyes. And that's just a few of them. I've actually decluttered a few BH Cosmetics palettes over the years, mainly because they discontinue their palettes, which is I think is so tragic, but I understand why, especially affordable brands do this sometimes. I'm so sad about this one. I also had a couple more though, like the Switzerland palette that I really loved, the London one. That's a beautiful palette as well. Very impressive formulas. I still have my Zodiac palette, which I think is amazing. Both their mattes and shimmers perform so high-end. You don't have to build them up. They blend like a dream, but they go on so quickly and easily. Nothing ever gets muddy together. Like all the colors, they really combine together really well. I've never had an issue with any of their formulas. I've always been wildly impressed with them. In fact, I was on their website this morning to see what they currently have available, and it looks like there are a few more that I might have to I might have to make a BH Cosmetics purchase soon because it's been a while. Definitely deserve the top mention for eyeshadow palettes that perform every bit as good as some of my best high-end stuff. Okay, almost there, guys. We have just a handful of lip products to go through. First off, a lip liner. So I have a couple lip liners. I've talked a lot about the LA Girl lip liners, both of which I would say could be included in this video, but I think I just talked about them in my last video. But I have one to mention that's relatively new to me that I am extremely impressed with. It's the Essence 8-Hour Matte Comfort Lip Liner. You guys know I love my long wearing lip liners, especially if I can find them from the drugstore, and sometimes that is a difficult thing to find a really good budge proof long wearing lip liner from the drugstore. This one is fantastic. The shade is really good. It's just a basic nude. I am wearing this on my lips today. That's the only color that you're seeing on my lips. I have a gloss on top that we'll talk about in a sec. Just a nice warm peachy nude that's not overly warm or overly pink. Beautiful formula. If you put this on your lips before they have anything like a balm or a lipstick or a gloss on them, put it on while they're a little bit dry and then smudge it in. Let it set for about 30 seconds. It will not go anywhere. You will have color on your lips for hours and hours, even if you're eating lunch. This thing will last through lunch if you let it set down. And the price on this thing, just like the LA Girl ones, around like $3 or $4. You really can't beat that for a budge proof lip liner that comes in a good nude shade. Definitely recommend this. Just as good as my Charlotte Tilbury or my Natasha Denona. This thing is a fraction of the price and wears just as well. Last is a lip gloss. I think this is my favorite lip gloss at the drugstore. You might know what I'm talking about if you've watched my other videos over the last couple years. I'm talking about the Maybelline Lifter Gloss. This particular shade of this particular gloss is, in my opinion, the best gloss at the drugstore. If I had to pick just one drugstore lip gloss to use for the rest of my life, it would be this one right here. This is in the shade Opal. It's the most beautiful shade. It's like a light pink toned shimmery shade. Let me just give it a little swatch for you guys right here. So there it is right there. It goes beautifully on top of anything, any lipstick, any lip liner. Even on its own, it gives you just a tiny bit of color and this beautiful, subtle, sparkly shine. The smell of these I talk about often. They smell like vanilla cupcakes, and the packaging is really fancy and high-end feeling. So this particular lip gloss in Opal is a perfect dupe for Fenty's lip gloss in Sweet Mouth, which is another old favorite of mine. They truly are exactly the same. I mean, they look exactly the same. There it is. Right there. I actually think I prefer the smell of the Maybelline one, even though I do love the Fenty one as well. But as for the price, the Maybelline one, this one's about $8 if you buy it at Target, whereas the Fenty one is $21. This one does have a little bit more product inside, but if we price out how much it is per milliliter, the Fenty one is $2.30 per milliliter, whereas the Maybelline is $1.56 per milliliter. So much more affordable, and I love it every bit as much, if not more, than my favorite high-end lip gloss. And that is going to do it for the drugstore products I think are every bit as good as high-end. What did you guys think of my collection of products? Anything you were surprised by? What would you include? If you could pick one drugstore product that you think is just as good, if not better, than your high-end stuff, let me know down in the comments below. But that's gonna do it for today. Thank you guys for stopping by. I hope you guys are doing well. Let me give you one last reminder. Please consider subscribing before you leave, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye.